You just put on deodorant this morning. You probably didn't think about it. It's automatic, like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. But the real answer to what your ancestors smelled like is far stranger than you think. Picture a hunter-gatherer 40,000 years ago. No soap, no showers, no perfume. Your instinct says the smell must have been unbearable. Rotting, sour, thick enough to choke on. That image feels obvious. It feels like common sense. It's wrong. Not completely wrong, but wrong in a way that says more about you than it does about them. Your nose today is not the same instrument their nose was. Your sense of disgust is not the same sense of disgust they carried. And the smell that fills your imagination when you picture ancient human is a smell your own culture invented for you, long after those humans were gone. Start with the body itself. Human beings have somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands. Most of those are eccrine glands, and they produce a thin, mostly odorless fluid. It's mostly water and salt. On its own, sweat barely smells like anything at all. The odor you associate with body smell comes from a second kind of gland, the apocrine glands, clustered mainly in the armpits and groin. Apocrine sweat is thicker, oilier, and it feeds the bacteria living on your skin. Those bacteria break the sweat down, and the byproducts of that breakdown are what you actually smell. In other words, body odor isn't really your body's smell at all. It's the smell of bacteria eating your sweat. Here's the part that reframes everything. Ancient humans had the exact same glands you have. The exact same bacteria families lived on their skin. Their biology hadn't changed. What had changed dramatically was how they lived alongside that biology. Consider clothing. For most of human history, clothing was minimal, seasonal, and often made from animal hide or woven plant fiber. Unlike a cotton t-shirt worn for 3 days straight, hide doesn't trap moisture and bacteria against the skin the same way. Sweat evaporated more freely. Bodies spent more time exposed to sun, wind, and open air, all of which reduced the bacterial buildup that produces strong odor. Modern humans, by contrast, wear synthetic fabric, sit in climate-controlled rooms, and layer scented products on top of unscented ones. That combination is actually a near-perfect recipe for trapping and amplifying odor, not reducing it. Now consider water. You imagine ancient humans as unwashed. But most hunter-gatherer groups lived near rivers, lakes, or coastlines because water access was survival, not luxury. Anthropological studies of remaining hunter-gatherer societies, like the Hadza of Tanzania, show frequent contact with water for drinking, cooking, and cooling off, which incidentally washes the skin far more often than people assume. You don't need soap to rinse away surface bacteria. Water alone does a significant amount of that work. So if the body chemistry was the same, and water contact might have even been more frequent, where does the ancient human smelled terrible idea actually come from? It comes from history, not prehistory. And it comes from a specific historical detour. The Canadian historian Catherine Ashenberg documented this shift closely in her research on the cultural history of cleanliness. She traced how for long stretches of European history, particularly after the fall of Rome, public bathing was associated with disease, immorality, or even witchcraft. During certain plague periods, physicians believed hot water opened the pores and let sickness in. So people avoided washing entirely, sometimes for months. Perfume became a substitute for cleanliness rather than an addition to it. That is the era your mental image of filthy, foul-smelling humans actually belongs to. Not the Paleolithic. Not the deep past. A specific few centuries of early modern Europe, when hygiene and health got tangled together in exactly the wrong way. Somewhere along the way, that image got stretched backward in your imagination across tens of thousands of years and slapped onto every human who ever lived before plumbing. It's a case of recent history borrowing the name ancient when it wasn't ancient at all. But there's a deeper question underneath this one. Even if ancient humans smelled roughly the way modern humans would smell without daily washing, would that smell bother them the way it bothers you? This is where the psychology gets interesting. Disgust is not a fixed, universal reaction. It's a learned filter, tuned by culture and necessity. The public health researcher Valerie Curtis, who studied disgust extensively at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, argued that disgust evolved as a behavioral defense against pathogens. You feel disgust toward things statistically linked to disease. Rotting meat, bodily fluids, mold. But the specific threshold for what counts as too smelly is not hardwired at a fixed level. It's shaped by exposure, by what your environment trains you to expect as normal. Think about it this way. If everyone around you smells roughly the same, because everyone lives the same lifestyle, eats the same diet, and has the same access to water, that smell simply becomes background. It stops registering as offensive. It becomes the neutral baseline of being human, the same way you don't notice the smell of your own house until you've been away from it for a week. Ancient humans lived in small, tight-knit bands, often 30 to 50 people. Everyone in that band shared roughly the same body odor profile, shaped by the same diet and the same environment. There's no contrasting, clean standard walking around to make anyone feel abnormal. Odor wasn't a source of shame the way it can be in a modern office, surrounded by people wearing engineered fragrances that reset your baseline for what normal smells like. There's also a piece of this that isn't about hygiene at all. It's about diet. Body odor is heavily influenced by what you eat. Modern diets are loaded with processed sugar, refined fat, alcohol, and heavily seasoned foods, all of which change the compounds your body excretes through sweat. Ancient diets, built around whatever was locally available, wild plants, lean game, fish, forage tubers, would have produced a very different chemical signature. Not necessarily better or worse to a neutral nose, just different. Researchers studying diet and body odor have found that diets higher in red meat and processed foods tend to correlate with sweat that people rate as more unpleasant, compared to diets higher in fruits and vegetables. If that pattern holds even loosely across history, a hunter-gatherer eating seasonal, unprocessed food may well have smelled milder than the average person eating a modern fast food diet today. Now here's a twist that flips the entire question on its head. What if smell wasn't a problem to solve at all? What if, for most of human history, smell was actually a tool? The evolutionary biologist Mark Pagel, working alongside geneticist Walter Bodmer, published research proposing a theory about why humans lost most of their body hair in the first place. Their argument centered partly on parasites. Body hair is an excellent habitat for lice, ticks, and other biting insects, and thick fur traps them close to the skin. Losing that fur, they argued, may have been partly a defense mechanism against parasite load. But hairlessness came with a side effect. Bare skin makes body odor, and the signals riding on it far more detectable. Smell became a communication channel, not an accident. Consider what body odor could actually tell another human in that world. It could signal genetic compatibility, since studies on human odor preference have repeatedly found that people tend to rate the natural scent of individuals with different immune system genes, specifically the major histocompatibility complex, as more attractive than those with similar immune profiles. That's not a coincidence. Diverse immune genes in offspring means stronger disease resistance. Your nose, without you ever realizing it, may have been running a genetic compatibility test on every person you stood close to. Body odor could also signal health and stress. Sweat composition shifts under illness, under high cortisol, under fear. A band of early humans relying on each other for survival would have benefited enormously from an unconscious ability to detect who was sick, who was anxious, who might be a liability on a hunt that day. Smell wasn't noise to be masked. It was information. Useful, load-bearing information. That reframes the entire premise of the question. You're not asking whether ancient humans smelled bad. You're asking whether ancient humans smelled bad by a standard invented millennia after they died, using a nose trained by soap commercials and scented candles, applied backward onto people who never needed that standard in the first place. It also raises an uncomfortable mirror for you, standing here in the present. Your own sense of smell has been narrowed. Deliberately, commercially, and continuously. From the moment you were old enough to buy your own hygiene products, you were taught that your natural scent is a problem requiring a solution, sold to you in a bottle, refreshed every morning. Billions of dollars a year move through an industry built entirely on convincing you that the smell your body was designed to produce is something to be ashamed of. Ancient humans never received that message. Their bodies produced exactly the smell evolution built them to produce, and their communities never told them it was wrong. There is one more layer worth sitting with. Modern researchers studying the human skin microbiome have found something almost poetic. The specific mix of bacteria living on your skin right now is partly inherited, partly shaped by your environment, and remarkably stable over your lifetime, unless something dramatic disrupts it, like a course of antibiotics or a radical diet change. Twin studies and family studies on skin microbiota composition suggest that close relatives, and people who live together for extended periods tend to converge on similar bacterial profiles. Which means, in a very literal sense, families and small communities once shared something like a collective scent signature. A biological fingerprint of belonging, invisible but constant, carried on the skin of everyone who slept under the same roof or around the same fire. You don't have that anymore. Modern life scatters people across cities, apartments, and time zones, showering separately, using different products, eating different diets. The collective scent of a household or a tribe has been replaced by individual manufactured scent, each person wrapped in their own isolated cloud of engineered fragrance, designed specifically to smell like nobody else around them. Think about what that scattering actually cost you. A shared scent used to be a quiet signal of trust. Infants recognize their mother's specific odor within days of birth, well before their eyesight has sharpened enough to recognize a face clearly. That early bond, built through smell before anything else, may be one of the oldest forms of human attachment there is. Long before language, before shared meals, before shared stories, there was shared scent. It told an infant, without words, "This is safety, this is home, this is where I belong." Now stretch that outward, from a single infant to an entire band of 30 or 40 people. If scent signaled safety and belonging at the smallest scale, it likely did something similar at the group scale, too. A returning hunter, a returning scout, someone who had been away from the fire for days, would carry a different scent profile back with them. Not necessarily a bad one, just an unfamiliar one, shaped by new plants brushed against, new water crossed through, new prey handled. The group's noses, trained on each other every single day, may have picked up on that shift instantly, long before a single word was exchanged. Who is this? Are they still one of us? Smell may have been doing quiet identity work that you now outsource entirely to faces, names, and phones. There's a practical angle here, too, one that rarely makes it into the conversation. Ancient humans weren't indifferent to unpleasant smells. Far from it. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence shows repeated, deliberate use of aromatic plants, resins, and smoke, not for pleasure alone but as functional tools. Burning certain woods and herbs kept insects away from sleeping areas. Rubbing crushed plants on the skin masked scent during a hunt, so prey animals, which often rely far more heavily on smell than humans do, wouldn't catch the approach of a predator standing upwind. In other words, ancient humans absolutely manipulated their own scent when it served a purpose. They just weren't doing it out of shame. They were doing it out of strategy. That distinction matters more than it might seem. A modern person reaches for deodorant because they've been told their natural smell is socially unacceptable, something to hide before it's noticed. An ancient hunter rubbing crushed sage on bare skin before a stalk through tall grass wasn't hiding from embarrassment. They were hiding from an animal with a nose sharp enough to end the hunt before it started. One is defense against judgment. The other is defense against a very real, very immediate threat to survival. Smell control existed in both worlds. The reason behind it changed almost completely. There's also a seasonal piece worth considering, because ancient humans is really shorthand for an enormous span of time and an enormous range of climates. A band living through a cold northern winter, huddled in furs inside a shelter for warmth, would have experienced far less airflow, far less bathing opportunity, and likely a stronger accumulated scent than a band living in a warm coastal region with daily access to open water. The truthful answer to "did ancient humans smell bad?" isn't one answer at all. It shifts by season, by geography, by the specific pressures a specific group faced that year. Painting every hunter-gatherer across 60,000 years and every continent with a single smell isn't just inaccurate. It flattens an enormous, varied human story into a punchline. There's one final thread worth pulling, and it might be the strangest one of all. If ancient humans genuinely didn't experience their own natural scent as offensive, then the discomfort you feel toward body odor today isn't some ancient survival instinct passed down unbroken through the generations. It's a relatively recent cultural installation layered on top of an older, more neutral biology. You weren't born disgusted by sweat. You were trained to be. Somewhere between infancy and adulthood, through advertising, through playground teasing, through a parent quietly suggesting you might want to shower before school, that training took hold. It took hold so thoroughly that it now feels like instinct rather than upbringing. That's worth sitting with for a moment, because it flips the entire direction of the question you started with. You didn't ask whether ancient humans were disgusting by some fixed, universal standard. There is no such standard. What you actually asked, without realizing it, was whether ancient humans lived up to a standard invented by people who came thousands of years after them, a standard built by soap manufacturers, perfume houses, and a few centuries of confused medical advice about what water supposedly did to the human body. Ancient humans never failed that standard because that standard didn't exist yet. It would be a little like judging someone from the Ice Age for not owning a smartphone. The comparison only works if you ignore that the entire framework hadn't been invented. And maybe that's the most useful thing this question actually hands you. Not a fact about the past, but a mirror pointed straight at the present. Every time you reach for a scented product before leaving the house, you're not just managing odor. You're participating in a very specific, very modern story about what a body is supposed to smell like, a story that would have made no sense at all to someone standing by a fire 40,000 years ago, surrounded by people who smelled exactly like them and felt no need to apologize for it. So did ancient humans smell bad? By the standard their own world used? Almost certainly not. Their bodies matched their environment. Their odor matched their neighbors. Their noses weren't primed by 100 competing perfumes to treat natural scent as an emergency. The idea that they were walking around in a permanent cloud of stench says less about the Paleolithic and more about a few unlucky centuries in European history when bathing briefly, wrongly, became a medical taboo, and that mistake somehow got mistaken for the entire span of prehistory. You put on deodorant again tomorrow morning. You probably won't think about it, same as always. But maybe just for a second, you'll wonder whether the smell hiding underneath it was ever really the problem in the first place, or whether the problem was that somewhere along the way, you were taught to be disgusted by the version of yourself that evolution spent millions of years building.